In this chapter, you'll learn how costs and consequently profitability is affected by changes in volume. You might think that it is obvious that costs always increase as volume increases. However, the increase is not always proportional. Variable costs are costs that increase proportionally to volume changes. For example, if you make twice as many cupcakes, you will use twice as much flour and sugar. Fixed costs are costs that a company incurs no matter what volume they produce. The cost of depreciation on baking equipment is fixed. You will incur the same total depreciation cost whether you make 100 cupcakes or 1,000. Why does this matter? First, the difference between fixed and variable costs affects your break-even point, the point when your costs exactly equal your revenues. Entrepreneurs will tell you their initial goal is to achieve break-even as quickly as possible so that they quit losing money. The higher your fixed costs, the more units you will need to sell in order to break even. I encourage you to read this chapter carefully. The concepts you learn in this chapter are critical to your understanding of topics in later chapters, including operating leverage, incremental analysis, and product pricing.
Folks, welcome aboard Flight 2459, service to Dallas Love Field, Austin.
Southwest Airlines is simply the most legendary and successful company in modern aviation history. So almost everyone has a Southwest story, whether you're an employee working for the company or you're a devoted customer to the products that Southwest has offered for nearly 40 years.
Back then, in 1971, Southwest was just a scrappy upstart with a cheeky sense of humor.
And a schedule you could depend on.
Today, they're still cheeky, but they carry more passengers within the U.S. than any other airline, and they've been profitable every single year of their existence, even during tough times when some competitors were losing 10 to 15 million a day. Managing any business requires an understanding of how costs respond to changes in business activity and the effect of changes in costs and volume on profits. Within cost behavior analysis, companies classify costs in a variety of ways. Variable costs are costs that vary in total, directly and proportionately with changes in the activity level. So, for example, if an airline paid 10 cents a bag for peanuts and a flight had 1 passenger, the cost for peanuts would be 10 cents. If there were 50 passengers, the cost would be $5. And if there were 100 passengers, it would be $10. Variable costs may also be defined as costs that remain the same per unit at every level of activity within a relevant range. So, the per unit cost of a bag of peanuts would be the same regardless of the number of passengers on the plane. Fixed costs are costs that remain the same in total, regardless of changes in the activity level. The salary of the pilot on that flight, for example, would be the same regardless if he or she flew 50 passengers or 100. Because total fixed costs remain constant as activity changes, fixed costs per unit vary inversely with activity. As volume increases, unit costs decrease, and vice versa. Thus, if we were to calculate the pilot's salary per passenger, for 1 passenger, the fixed cost per unit would be $200. For 2 passengers, it would be $100. And for 100 passengers, it would be just $2. Today, airlines like Southwest are thought of largely as variable cost companies because fuel, often their largest cost, can fluctuate wildly in price. How significant is this particular variable cost to their bottom line? They consume 1.4 billion gallons of fuel a year, so just a 1 cent per gallon increase equals $14 million. It follows then that cost-volume profit analysis would play a key role in their planning processes. The most significant relationship in cost-volume-profit analysis is the level of activity at which total revenues equal total costs, or the break-even point. A great way for a company to determine a break-even point is to prepare a cost-volume-profit graph, also known, not surprisingly, as a break-even graph. Let's examine a typical airline round-trip flight. To keep things simple, we'll assume that every ticket costs $100 and that the plane has 150 seats. Okay, looking at our graph, we've got our units of sales along the horizontal axis, which in this case is seats. The vertical axis is labeled dollars because we'll use it to record both total revenues and total costs, fixed plus variable. First, we'll plot our total sales line, starting at 0 and going up to max capacity. So, total revenue for a full plane would be $100 times 150 seats, or $15,000. The revenue line here is linear throughout, since all tickets cost the same. Next, we'll plot our total fixed cost, which in this case happens to be $4,000, and it is the same at every level of activity. This represents things like the pilot's salary, overhead, and administrative costs. Our total cost line starts at the fixed cost line at 0 activity. For this flight, we'll assume a variable cost of $60 per seat. So if the plane were fully occupied, the variable cost would be $60 times 150 seats, or $9,000. And the total cost would be $9,000 in variable costs plus $4,000 in fixed costs, or $13,000. Subtracting that total cost from total revenue, we get a $2,000 profit round trip. And where do they break even? That would be here at the intersection of the total cost line and the total sales line, where at 100 seats or 10,000 in sales, Southwest covers their costs but has not yet earned a profit. Okay, now the interesting part. Southwest flights are not always full, of course. In fact, the average last year was 75% occupancy. On our graph, that translates to just $480 in profit round trip, or $240 each way. Wait, $240 in profit? Can that be true? Well, yes. In fact, the average profit for a one-way flight on Southwest last year was just slightly higher at $290. And if you divide that by their average one-way ticket price of $58, you can see that just 5 passengers per flight kept the most successful airline in the USA in the black. Why are airline margins so razor thin? Mostly because ticket prices, adjusted for inflation, are half of what they were 25 years ago, while fuel costs have skyrocketed. And that explains why most airlines now charge for checked baggage. Most, but not Southwest.
The leadership really made a courageous decision early on in this process. There were Wall Street analysts saying, "What are you doing? You're leaving hundreds of millions of dollars of incremental revenue on the table." But people don't want to feel nickeled and dimed. They don't want to come back to that.
How did Southwest make this decision? By analyzing cost behavior and cost volume profit. Southwest flies just one type of aircraft, and the resulting efficiencies give them the lowest baggage handling costs in the industry. Crunching the numbers, they predicted that the Bags Fly Free program would lead to higher occupancy rates and more revenue, and the profits would outweigh incremental revenue gained from baggage fees. And, as Brad explains, their prediction was correct.
Our leadership noted a significant share shift, more than 1%, which is about $1 billion worth of customer business shifting over to us for no reason other than the Bags Fly Free strategy.
The airline business is complex, and few companies today seem to properly manage all their fixed and variable costs, from personnel to fuel contracts to flight schedules. Southwest does it well, manages customer loyalty, and seems to have an awful lot of fun in the process.
I wonder about your pricing power. Can you raise prices further?
Yes, we have, of course, significant headwinds from both raw materials and tariffs, but for the second quarter in a row now, we've been able to fully offset those headwinds through pricing. And on top of that, we've been quite successful in driving positive sales mix, meaning that we're selling more of our more innovative, higher margin, higher featured products in the market. So that's really supporting our profit margins in the face of slightly tougher market conditions.
How much have the recently increased tariffs in the U.S. affected your business?
Well, I think we've been successful in passing on those tariffs in terms of pricing, but of course that pricing in turn has a dampening effect on overall market demand. So that's really what we're seeing. We're getting the pricing, but demand is a little bit softer as a result in North America.
So are you saying then that your pricing power has been there but is weakening as you continue to raise prices? Is it becoming a problem? Will you have difficulty raising prices going forward?
Well, I think the overall, of course, there is price elasticity in the market. So as prices go up, then volumes go down a little bit. That's an overall market phenomenon. But I would say our pricing power is strong, and our ability to raise prices and at the same time sell more of our more premium, highly featured products speaks to the fact that we have significant pricing power and innovation power in the market.
What are the products that you think are the strongest right now for Electrolux? What are your rising stars?
Mm-hmm. So we are rolling out now a global multi-door fridge, large capacity fridge that's doing extremely well. We're launching a new kitchen range under the Electrolux brand globally, starting in Australia and Asia Pacific. That's doing well. We're rolling that out heavily in Europe now in the third quarter. That's probably our biggest launch of the year and really exciting. Also, we're relaunching our vacuum cleaner range with a full-size cordless vacuum cleaner that's really doing extremely well in the marketplace. So lots of exciting launches.
Do you see an effect, and I'm looking at, small portable air conditioning units. I live in Berlin. The Germans haven't really heard of air conditioning. Obviously, climate change is forcing many to actually look at it as an option. Are you seeing any effects on climate change in your business globally?
Yeah, I would say structurally over time, more markets are now buying air conditioners. So that's definitely a factor. Then if you look at this year in particular, our biggest aircon market is North America, and there actually the season has been relatively slow this year. But overall and trending, I would say yes, the overall demand for air conditioning is increasing globally, mainly in Asia, but globally.
What is your outlook for raw materials? You said they've been a headwind. If I look at the Dallas Fed outlook for prices, it's actually come down. But obviously, you're a much more global business, not just worried about what's going on in Dallas or the U.S. What's your outlook for raw materials prices for the rest of the year?
I would say sequentially prices are coming down, but still on a year-over-year basis, contract to contract, if you will, we will still see some headwinds in the second half of the year. But as you say, the trend right now seems to be clearly in a sequentially downward trend.
Let me ask you finally about the markets. For you, you're planning to spin off your professional products unit. Mm-hmm. What's the progress of that spin-off right now? Can you give us any update as far as expected timing?
Yeah, the preparation work is going really well. The board yesterday reconfirmed the plans to spin off the professional business. We're targeting first quarter 2020 for the public launch of the company.
I wonder about your pricing power. Can you raise prices further?
Yes. The overall demand for air conditioning is increasing globally, mainly in Asia, but to be clearly in a sequentially downward trend.
Let me ask you finally about the markets. For you, you're planning to spin off your professional products unit. Mm-hmm. What's the progress of that spin-off right now? Can you give us any update as far as expected timing?
Yeah, the preparation work is going really well. The board yesterday reconfirmed the plans to spin off the professional business. We're targeting first quarter 2020 for the public launch of the company.
worried about what's going on in Dallas or the U.S. What's your outlook for raw materials prices for the rest of the year?
I would say sequentially prices are coming down, but still on a year-over-year basis, contract to contract, if you will, we will still see some headwinds in the second half of the year. But as you say, the trend right now seems to be clearly in a sequentially downward trend.
Let me ask you finally about the markets. For you, you're planning to spin off your professional products unit. Mm-hmm. What's the progress of that spin off right now? Can you give us any update as far as expected timing?
Yeah, the preparation work is going really well. The board yesterday reconfirmed the plans to spin off the professional business. We're targeting first quarter 2020 for the public launch of the company.
The purpose of this problem is to apply various cost, volume, profit concepts. We're given information regarding a barbership. The barbership employs 7 barbers and pays each a base rate of $1,370 per month. One of the barbers also serves as the manager and receives an extra $530 per month. In addition to the base rate, each barber also receives a commission of $5.84 per haircut. Other costs include advertising, rent, supplies, utilities, and magazines. The barbershop charges $11.65 per haircut. The first part of this problem asks us to determine the variable cost per haircut and the total monthly fixed costs. To determine the variable costs, we need to identify those costs that change on a per unit basis. And so we know that this would include the commissions, which we're told are $5.84, the supplies, which increase by 44 cents per haircut, and the utilities, which increases in total by 37 cents per haircut. And so the total variable costs are $6.65. Next, we do the fixed costs, and these are costs that the amount of the cost does not change with increases in the number of haircuts. And so, first of all, we have the salaries, and the base salaries would be 7 times 1,370, which would be 9,590. Then we have the manager's salary, the manager's extra salary, and that was an extra $530. In addition, we've got the advertising, and the advertising is $250 a month. Rent, $960 a month. Utilities of $170 a month, and the magazines of $25 a month. And so our total fixed cost would be $11,525. The next part of this problem asks us to compute the break-even point in units and dollars. We'll use the information we're given regarding the price of $11.65 per haircut, as well as the variable cost of $6.65 per haircut, and the fixed cost of $11,525. So we can employ the equation approach, and if we write this out as an equation, we know that the sales would be $11.65 times X, where X is the number of haircuts, and that then would be equal to at the break-even point, that would be equal to the variable cost of $6.65 times X, the number of haircuts, plus the fixed cost of $11,525. So now we can solve for X by moving the $6.65 X over to the left-hand side, which gives us then simply 5X. And so 5X is equal to $11,525. And notice then that then we'll divide through by 5. And notice that 5 in this case is the contribution margin. $11.65 is the selling price minus $6.65 is the variable cost. The selling price minus the variable cost is the contribution margin, which is $5. And, you know, for those of you who want to skip a step, you can simply divide the fixed cost by the contribution margin, which is what we're doing right here. And we end up with X is equal to 2,305 haircuts. So that would be the answer to the first part. The second part, where we want break even in dollars, we simply will take the 2,305 haircuts times the price of each haircut, which is $11.65, and that gives us sales at the break-even point of $26,853. The next part of this problem asks us to compute the net income, assuming that there are 2,440 haircuts given in a month. So to solve for net income, we will take the selling price of $11.65 times the number of haircuts that we're assuming, which is 2,440, minus our costs. And our costs will be, first of all, our variable costs of $6.65 times the number of haircuts, which is 2,440, plus our fixed costs of 11,525. So everything in the brackets here represents our costs, our variable costs plus our fixed costs. We're going to subtract those costs from our revenue, and we end up with net income of $675.